Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dwelt Podcast number 4. We've got a lot going on this week, and I apologize for the delay between the last podcast and this podcast. I went to Texas to watch the eclipse and spend time with family. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and all of the rumors coming or leading up to the eclipse, what people are saying about the eclipse now, and what we might expect, as well as, oh my gosh, we have Ukraine got hit with their fuel systems are down, their electrical systems are down. We've got Hezbollah sending 40 rockets into Israel and what that might look like. We never talked about General Conference. We had General Conference, so there's some topics there to bring up. And then, of course, we have a lot of input from our listeners on questions or topics that they want covered. So my name is Mitch Waite. I'm here with Chris Hardman and Dan Jensen, and we're ready to get started. Chris, Dan, you want to chime in on topics you have, or even just to say hello?
Yeah, I'm fired up today because I had to go to the Home Depot, and I hate the Home Depot. So I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
Awesome.
We could do a whole podcast about that, apparently, right? About your experiences there.
You know, one time I went to Home Depot to buy some preparedness supplies, and I checked. I had tarp, rope, and duct tape. And I get to the checkout, and there was a lady at the checkout. She was about my age, and she goes, "Oh, you got a hot date tonight?" I was like, "What the crap?" Yeah. It was a little sketchy. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've gone into Home Depot and thought, oh, I had to get that, or I had to get that. I recently ordered from Amazon a whole box with like thousands of nuts and bolts and washers in it, because here at the farm, I'm always fixing stuff. And I'm always like, oh, now I got to run to the hardware store and buy, this one bolt that's just the size. Yep. And so I got all those, and I'm going through them, and I'm like, I wonder how long this is going to last me. Like, is this even a year's supply of hardware? So it's amazing the things you can look at and go, am I going to need this? And if you look up the original packing list for the first company of Pioneers, it's really pretty cool. I've got it saved. Maybe I'll pull it up here, but it's got on there things like a year's worth of nails. So they had to haul, however many pounds of nails, 50 pounds worth of nails in their wagons on their way out. There's a whole bunch of other stuff on the list. It's pretty surprising, but nails and rope, canvas, and they had some shared supplies that they would take, like 1 barrel of fish for every so many families, stuff like that. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I went off to the eclipse. You guys want to talk about your eclipse experiences here and different thoughts on the eclipse? We'll hit that one first, since it seems to be kind of a hot topic still.
My experience was looking at it through an office window, so it wasn't that exciting. I did not use glasses.
You didn't go outside?
Because I'm a man. No, I just channeled the Trump energy and looked directly at it. I can still see.
Nice.
So lying to you.
Could you tell if it was any dimmer during the eclipse?
It was kind of cloudy here, so it would start to get dimmer, and I'd be like, "Oh, it's happening," and then I'd look out the window, and it was just a cloud. So no, not really.
Yeah.
Okay.
We noticed that a lot. The clouds just kept moving across in front of it. But I actually got some pretty cool photos with my iPhone. I put the glasses in front of the lens and then zoomed in, and it worked pretty well. It was kind of fun. And then I noticed a distinct drop in the temperature. Like, it was already a little cold when the clouds would come, but you could definitely feel the difference in the air. It was pretty cool. So
cool.
I got to watch it with my kids, use the glasses. They loved it. It was definitely a fun thing, but we only got like 50% here. So we want to hear how it was for you, Mitch.
So I went to the one in 2017. We went up to Wyoming and experienced it there. And I think Mahatva tweeted something about this, but it's something that you guys have heard me talk about before, where I think it is a unique experience that people who go, they have this I don't know, this awe-inspiring experience where they go, wait a minute, reality is different than what I've assumed it to be. And so the one in 2017, you could see the corona, the shape of the corona, and it's this white light that comes forward behind from outside the moon, obviously from the sun, but outside the shadow of the moon. And it's this brilliant white light. It's beautiful. It's astounding. Everything goes dark, darker than you would think. And so it's pretty awe-inspiring. Well, I was looking forward to the eclipse in Texas. We actually have family out there. My wife has a couple of sisters and a brother that live out there. And my in-laws, my father-in-law and mother-in-law drove out. And so it was this, really great time to get together as a family. And it just so happens that my sister-in-law married a guy whose family was in my family's ward when I was younger. And so my family and that family are friends. We've known each other for years. His dad's done business with my dad, and they had a few of their siblings out. And so it ended up being this great gathering of family. And we've talked about it before, but I wasn't convinced that there would be anything calamitous that would happen outside of just the normal crowds going, all in one place. People were concerned about terrorist attacks. People were concerned about earthquakes or lightning storms. It being a sign of Nineveh and destruction happening immediately. And I pushed back on that. Chris and I have talked about that a little bit, where I was like, I don't know. I haven't heard anybody with priesthood authority say this is a sign, watch for it. And so, but I was prayerful about it and felt like, the other thing is at the last minute, they said it's going to be cloudy. You're not going to be able to see it anyway. And so I prayed about it and felt like I should go just to even connect with family and spend time with family. So we loaded up the Suburban and we drove the 20 hours out there. It took us a couple of days. We caravanned with some friends. So we were able to put kids in their car and their kids in our car so that the kids could kind of entertain each other. We got out there, had a great conference weekend. And then Monday we all got together at one house, just, all of us, my in-laws and this family that was in my ward growing up. And man, we ate like kings, and we went outside and they had telescopes, and it was cloudy part of the time and not cloudy the other part of the time. And we just sat out there, dozens of us, and had a great time. We watched the eclipse as it started. As it was going into totality, cloud cover came. And so we got maybe like 15 seconds of seeing it in totality. Of course, everything did get dark, and that's an impressive and awe-inspiring experience. But yeah, and then it went into totality. I didn't take any photos of it in totality because I just wanted to see and experience it in real life. And then it started undoing itself, and it went away, and we still had a wonderful time together. But I didn't have any revelatory experiences other than I really want to see that again. I think it's so cool. I think it does illustrate to us that there is a divine design behind everything, and it really brings in that perspective. So it was super cool. And then we drove the 20 hours back, which ended up, because of the crowds, ended up being about 30 hours back. So we took 3 days to come home instead of 2 days. And we went hiking in Moab and climbed up to some arches, and the kids loved that. So that was my experience. I hate to say I told you so to everybody who thought it would bring calamitous events right at the eclipse and after. And it's interesting to see people are saying, well, there was 40 days between the sign of Nineveh and the destruction of Nineveh. So we should expect that 40 days from last Monday, we will see destruction. I guess there is probably some precedence in the scriptures about that, but again, I don't know. I know that prophets have declared calamities will come. I don't know if they're necessarily tied to the eclipse, and I think they're already upon us in so many ways.
I had a lot of people like tweet at me, and they were saying, oh, you were wrong. Nothing happened during the eclipse. And I'm like, I never said anything was going to happen during the eclipse. I don't know where you got that from. I just said it was a sign that stuff is coming. That's what I think, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, World War
That
III
does
might kick
remind.
off tonight. It might kick off while we're recording this. How things are going.
I
In the
think
Middle East, so.
Yeah.
I think World War III already kicked off. I mean,
That's-
you think about the
there's some
number of
argument
nations
there.
involved. Yeah. So we've got obviously the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. Think of all of the countries involved in that event, like all the companies or countries that are backing Ukraine, sending dollars there, sending people there, sending equipment there. It is kind of fascinating to see all the dollars that the U.S. Sends to Ukraine, which ends up coming back to Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and all of the military equipment providers. It really does remind me of the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Have you guys read that or aware of that?
No.
Oh, okay. So it's out of print, so you can't find them. I have a copy here that I will lend you if you sign in blood that you'll return it. But it's a really good book. It's a first-person account of a guy who was working for a consulting company, got recruited by the NSA, and was taught this process of taking down foreign economies and expanding the U.S. empire. And basically, they would go into I don't know, Nicaragua and say, hey, we'll lend you the money for a new dam so you can have electricity and infrastructure for your people, and it'll be backed by the U.S. So, you're guaranteed to get the loan. The U.S. would back the loan would be written, the money would go to Nicaragua, but the contract for the loan said you can only use U.S. contractors. So then they would go and contract with Halliburton and all of these, major construction companies that won the bids that incidentally senators all own stock in. And those companies would go down and build the infrastructure and then leave. And then Nicaragua would be on the hook to pay that loan back using the proceeds from the power that they sold to their people. Well, it always ended up that they designed these things so that the proceeds from selling power was never enough to cover the loan. So then the US government would go, hey, you're going to default on your loan. We'll cover it for you. We'll pay this loan off for you, but you got to give us a military base on your land. Or you got to give us whatever it is, whatever they want. You got to give us import rights or export rights and no tariffs, and we want a military base and we want logistical access to your ports, and these countries would sign up for that, and that's how they expanded the presence of the U.S. military throughout the globe. Pretty fascinating read, and he talks about multiple countries, half a dozen countries where he personally was involved in this, and he tried to cry wolf, or he tried to be a whistleblower, and they shut him down. They canceled, like, all of his bank accounts disappeared. He got blackmailed and lost his family, and he was just totally canceled. And so he ended up waiting X number of years and wrote the book and published it before it could really, be stopped. So anyway, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
So we've got the UK, we've got Ukraine and Russia. We've got this whole conflict between Israel and Iran, really, that's coming up. I mean, what was it? Iran sent 40 missiles to the Iron Dome.
I think it was over 50, but
was it 50?
Maybe, yeah.
And this reminds
Iran, it was not. It wasn't officially the country.
Oh, right. It was Hezbollah.
They're saying.
Yeah, it was Hezbollah sending out.
I mean, it was Iran, but they like to use that as a.
Yeah, it's like, who's funding Hezbollah? Well, the U.S. is kind of funding Hezbollah. Which this brings me to this letter from Albert Pike to Mancini. Let me pull it up. Or Chris, I'll send you the link and you can share it on the screen.
Okay.
But are you guys familiar with the Albert Pike letter to Mancini?
I am, yeah. I've read it.
Let me see if I can chat it to you.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so Albert Pike is a historical figure. There's a statue of him in Washington, D.C. He was a Freemason, and I believe he was, so he was a 33-degree Mason, Grand Master, creator of the Southern jurisdiction of Masonic Scottish Rite Order. And he basically, if I remember right, he went to France and learned, moved up in the Masonic Lodge and eventually became a Grand Master and came to the U.S. and established it here. And so this is a letter, allegedly a letter that he wrote to a guy named Giuseppe Mazzini, 1871. It was on display in the museum library in London until 1977. And the British Library in London denies the letter exists. So who knows if this is real or not. But in 1871, he writes this letter and he says, we're gonna cause 3 world wars. The First World War, and then he describes exactly how the First World War happens. The Second World War, he describes that. And then this Third World War is what we're talking about today. And I think we're seeing shadows of this, whether this is real or not. It kind of seems like this is playing out in front of our eyes. So he says, the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur, which is the agents of the Illuminati, end quote, between political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and the Muslim Arabic world and political Zionism, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. And if we look at where the U.S. is, which there are other prophecies that the U.S. will exhaust its resources in foreign wars to the point that we then become vulnerable to an attack. So he says, once they get to this point, we shall unleash the nihilists, and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute theism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. So he's like, when the nations exhaust themselves in this war between the Zionists and the Muslims, we will do something, a social cataclysm that will literally slaughter millions, and it will throw the atheists and the nihilists under the bus. Basically, it'll be like, see, this is why we need morality and divinity, which sounds counterintuitive if they're trying to destroy morality and divinity. But they want to ultimately get rid of the atheists by doing this thing.
This is kind of interesting, considering where we're at with Iran about to attack Israel and tying in the potential of Ezra's eagle, where it says the first eagle head causes terror throughout the world. It's like, okay, so this first part could happen any minute now. It could happen while we're recording, where Iran attacks Israel, and apparently Israel already has a plan to attack back. And then you have this part where he's talking about that they'll provoke some kind of formidable social cataclysm, which sounds a lot like something the first eagle head does. So it's kind of lining up. This is what I like to look for with these things, is multiple, prophecies,
witnesses,
conspiracies, all lining up perfectly. Like it seems to be with this letter.
So what I like to do is I like to put these things with Post-it notes on a wall, and then I take a red string and pin it across all to see where they all connect. No. Okay, so then he says, then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries. So there will be, after this cataclysmic event, there will be revolutionaries that are like, we're taking over. We're establishing our new government. It's almost like in 3rd Nephi chapter 6, I believe. Yeah, 3rd Nephi chapter 6, where they become tribal again. The government collapses and they become tribal, and they have to just organize in families and tribes. So these world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate the destroyers of civilization and the multitude. So everybody else that's not a revolutionary, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. And so just to kind of distill that down, it sounds to me like these revolutionaries will destroy civilization on the heels of this social cataclysm that'll happen. And everybody will be like, well, it was the Christians that were the revolutionaries, so they can't be right. You know, they murdered innocent people. They shed innocent blood. So Christianity is therefore defunct and false. And where are we going to look to for morality and a deity? And that's when they will roll out the light, quote unquote, the pure doctrine of Lucifer will be brought out into the public view. And then it says that people will say, oh, that's the truth. Basically, that's the truth. And that ties us back to Revelation 13, where we've got this beast that calls fire out of heaven and performs miracles, and people go, oh yeah, I'm gonna follow that being or that individual and their doctrine, and that is truth. So the Islam is dead, Judaism is dead, Christianity is dead. Let's all turn to this pure doctrine of Lucifer.
Something for context, for people who don't know, that I've always wondered is, like, these people are clearly Satanists. He says it right here that they want to manifest the pure doctrine of Lucifer. And if you're willing to accept that Lucifer exists, then you're accepting that God exists. And in my mind, it's like, why are you choosing the bad guy in that scenario? But Albert Pike wrote a book, and in that book, he describes this idea, this line of thinking, that they actually believe that Lucifer is the good guy in the story of the Garden of Eden, and that Adam and Eve were trapped on this prison planet, and Lucifer comes and frees them, basically. So,
yeah, and that's
I don't know if they think they actually are worshiping evil. I think they think they're on the good side.
For sure. Yeah, and that's if you look at the Epic of Baal, which is, I believe BYU Idaho has it on. I've got it saved somewhere. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So the Epic of Baal is on. Oh, they took it down. BYU Idaho used to have it published on their site, but it's no longer there. So you'll have to dig to find it. But the idea of the Epic of Baal is it's this very old document that talks about how Baal, you remember the gods of the Old Testament, Baal was the hero in the story, and that he fought against Elohim and Jehovah because Jehovah was going to bring death into the world, which is actually true. Jehovah brought death into the world when, after the fall, he slaughtered an animal or sacrificed an animal to create coats of skins for Adam and Eve so that they could have the physical protection they needed in the temporal world. And so, you know, just like you said, Chris, they think that they're fighting for the light and the truth. And anyway, I'll bet it's hard to find the Epic of Baal translated. It looks like Hanover College. Yeah, Hanover College has it. History.hanover.edu. You can go through, and it talks about Baal, talks about Asherah, Baal versus his father El, and Yam, his brother. It's pretty interesting. And you know, this kind of brings us back to what we were talking about. What's Beyonce's husband's name?
Jay-Z.
Jay-Z wearing T-shirts that say "Do what thou wilt," which was, you know, is a Luciferian construct. Like, look out for number one more than anything. And yeah, it's coming to light, and it's pretty scary, and it involves adrenochrome and all of that other bad stuff that's out there. So it kind of feels like this Albert Pike letter to Mazzini is playing out before our eyes.
We've made it 3 episodes without being banned on YouTube, but it's over with this. They're not going to let that. They're not going to let that be on there. I guess we'll see. I don't know. I think if you think you're worshiping the good guy, I don't know that the good guy would want you to sacrifice children, but that's just my thoughts. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, there was a tweet. I retweeted it. Let me see if I can find it. Just the other day. Yeah. So Michael Knowles tweets about, okay, so he shares, Elizabeth Warren tweets, here's your daily reminder that Donald Trump is responsible for overturning Roe versus Wade. And she's saying, because Donald Trump nominated conservative judges for the Supreme Court, then those Supreme Court judges overturned Roe versus Wade. And Michael Knowles, a conservative pundit, replies, I think he's a Catholic, replies, Moloch, hardest hit. And Moloch is the god of the Old Testament that they used to sacrifice children to. And so when you hear about sacrificing virgins, in ancient cultures, they were sacrificing to Moloch, who is depicted as a bull or an owl, and is the equivalent of, basically they would have go back to Jeremiah and read that book, and you'll see Jeremiah is telling them, stop worshiping Baal, which Baal is all about fertility. And so they would go into these groves and they would do inappropriate things with each other. And ultimately some of them would end up pregnant. And then Moloch was the god of prosperity. And so they would take that baby as soon as it was born and they would sacrifice it to Moloch so that they could prosper. And we have a very modern situation where the same thing or similar thing happens, where through worshiping Baal or through going to clubs and being, degenerate and sleeping around, eventually some women become pregnant. And then in order for them to prosper, they have to abort the baby so that they can go back to their job and make their money and not have this, costly baby to raise. And so, Michael Knowles tweets that Moloch hardest hit. And I quoted it and said, basically, 15 years ago, if I brought up this stuff, nobody would have believed it or even understood who Moloch is. And now here it is mainstream on Twitter. And I think it actually is the light of Christ radiating onto humanity, bringing things that are in the dark to light so that they can be scrutinized. And we've talked about how sunshine is a cleansing component. Light is cleansing. So I think we're seeing that right now.
I think it's Doctrine and Covenants that says their sins will be shouted from the rooftops in the last days.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't have a reference from that on the top of my head, but I did have a gentleman in my ward growing up that brought that up and said, one thing to look for is that they will be shouting their own sins from the rooftops. It won't be other people saying, oh, this guy committed adultery. It will be people standing on rooftops saying, I have a right to commit adultery. I should be able to. I love it. It's good for my mental health. It's good for humanity if I can express myself in this way. And we're definitely seeing that. I mean, there are parades about debauchery. I'll just say it. That people are, celebrating and shouting from the rooftops, hey, we want to be able to do this.
Yeah. Brace yourself. June is getting close.
Well, and people were tweeting, what was it? It was Easter. With Easter Sunday, they made it Trans Visibility Day or something like that.
Yeah, it was Easter.
And then somebody posted, well, actually, here are all the holidays that are declared for this type of lifestyle. And it's like the whole calendar. Yeah, there's June, but I mean, 2 or 3 times a month at least, there are celebrations of things being shouted from the rooftop.
It's everywhere. That's for sure.
Yeah.
There's no escaping it anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so how does that relate to preparedness? I have a tweet here. I'll share it with you, Chris. You can bring it up onto the screen. Let's just grab the link to it. So this is overnight, late night on Friday. 26 barges got loose and in the Ohio River, and they shut down all the bridges. I don't know if you guys saw. Did you guys see that? Yeah, see if you can pull up that link.
Sorry, I'm having microphone problems. I did not see that.
Oh, there we go.
I didn't
Yes. So it says here, 26 barges broke loose in the Ohio River late Friday, forcing the closing of the West End Bridge and a railroad bridge to Brunot Island. The barges are owned and operated by Campbell Transportation. No injuries have been reported. This is, of course, on the heels of the bridge. What was it? Francis Scott Key Bridge being obliterated by a barge that went out of power. And this is ringing a bell for me because my wife just listened to a book series, or is listening to a book series called Havoc in Wyoming by Millie Cooper. And in this book, Millie Cooper, it's a preparedness book, and it's a novel. So it talks about, how to survive in this situation. But instead of it being a novel about an EMP being let off, it's a novel or a series of novels about an attack against the US where they do three things. One, they take out bridges. So with barges or with charges, they blow up bridges. Two, they do a cyber attack where they take down basically the whole internet, which takes out power nationwide. And then number three, I forget what number three is. Beth and I just talked about this, but I forget what number three is. The cyber attack takes out all communication. And so this lady is far away from home. And so all the vehicles still work because it's not an EMP, but deliveries stop happening. So there's no fuel. So they quickly go back to, Micah chapter 5, the chariots and the horses are taken away and the cities are taken away. And this lady has to walk home to their farm where they have preparedness. And it's all about her journey and what equipment she has and what equipment she picks up along the way, what happens at the farm and what happens in general society as this happens. So, I think the idea of an EMP is pretty far-fetched, not just from a physics standpoint, but, getting a missile over the top of the center of the US and deploying it without any disruption. I think it's pretty far-fetched, but something like an attack on the power grid, attack on logistics and transportation, and attack on the internet.
Did we lose Mitch? We lost you for a second. Sorry, Mitch.
That's all right. Okay.
You're
Am I back? Okay.
You're back. You were just telling us how it's far-fetched for a missile to get over the center of the United States.
Yeah, so it's far-fetched that a missile can get over the center of the US and explode and fry all of our electronics, but it's not far-fetched that you take out a few bridges, you cyber attack, and you take out some power stations, and we're back in the Stone Age. And that's pretty sketchy. So I think, what we're seeing happening when I say World War III has already started, it kind of looks like it's already here. I saw this tweet. Let me see if I can pull this one up.
We also had a barge situation in New York where a barge lost power coming under one of the bridges, and they were able to stop it in that scenario. But it seems like this is not coincidental.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's one of those things where we only see it because they're reporting on it now. Like, I wonder how often barges hit bridges. Maybe it's a common thing. I don't know. I'd love to see some data on that. But
the other thing I always wonder is if it's intentional, like we're being attacked by someone who's doing it, or if this is just part of the slow collapse where incompetency is everywhere now. And so we're just seeing this stuff happen more and more. It's like the Boeing stuff. Like,
yeah.
things are just kind of slowly getting worse and falling apart.
Yeah, I believe that. And part of that is the lack of capital we see as interest rates have increased. There's less capital available. And so people are less able to hide their performance issues. Like you screw up, it takes your company down. Whereas before, if you screwed up, it's like, oh, we'll just borrow more money. It'll be available. And then somebody bigger will buy us in 3 years and we're good. This I think is relevant. So this is, I don't know Stephen W. Carlson. It says radical lib on there. So I don't know if I would get along with him, but he brings up this historical example. The early Christians fled and therefore mostly survived the siege of Titus because Jesus had warned them, then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains. And you remember, it's like, pray that your flight is not in wintertime or that you're pregnant or nursing. It says the early church historian Eusebius tells us of a prophetic oracle given to the Jerusalem church that caused them to flee the city before its destruction. Believers were to flee from the approaching Roman army as soon as they saw the sign of 1314. The Roman army did not practice the swift blitzkrieg kind of warfare. Their movement tended to be cautious, methodical, and relentless. Jesus warned against playing a waiting game to see how things would develop. And I think if World War III has started, and if this is an example of a methodical attack against the U.S., or even a methodical attack against believers, we should heed that call and get out of the line of fire, or at least be prepared to get out of the line of fire as we see it coming on. And so, I mean, this is the Dwelt podcast. That's part of the vision that we have, that we can create Dwelt locations all throughout the United States that people can flee to in order to be out of the line of fire and be in a position to help others that maybe, couldn't come up with a way to be prepared themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are old enough, but do you remember the bread lines in Soviet Russia before it collapsed in the USSR?
Not from personal memory, but I've seen it.
Okay. I remember being in grade school and seeing these news stories about how people were lined up for bread in Soviet Russia. And I was like, how is that even a thing? Like, the baker can just make more bread. There's always bread in the store. Like, we'd go down to our local Smiths and there's tons of bread. They always have bread. And I grew to learn that once you have supply chains that are collapsing and individual employee performance decreases, that all of a sudden, you can't even make enough bread for people. And as I see things like toilet paper running out, or remember children's ibuprofen ran out recently. I mean, I'm like, these are our modern day bread lines. We're already seeing it happen. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, we live in a world where everything is like, things have to run smoothly for things to keep working. It's like the just on time delivery and stuff similar to that. And so if things start to go bad, which I think we're seeing a little bit of, then systems start to break and this stuff can happen pretty quickly. Yeah. It's like slow until it's not, until you hit the point where it's just a drop off the cliff.
Yep. Okay. Well, I have a few more topics to bring up based on the news of the day, but do we have any listener or follower questions? I know I got one that came in from a tweet that I did the other day. Chris, do you have any lined up?
Yeah. So I have one about finances, and I think with all of the gold stuff going around, there's a ton of like talk about people buying gold, Costco selling it, Walmart selling it. We can tie it into that. They were just wondering what you do with finances if you're trying to prepare. And I said, I'm probably not the best one to ask because I took out all of my 401k and everything. I actually think it's all going to collapse, so I took it all out.
Actually, you are the one to ask then. How did you come to that decision?
I mean, if the banks are going to collapse, if like society's going to collapse, I just want my money. so I took it out.
That's awesome.
And I figure I've always kind of had the mindset of I can make more money. So if I'm wrong and I lose the time I would have been making money in my 401k, then oh well, I'll just find a way to make more money. But
yeah, that's good. Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, good question. I'm still kind of trying to understand that as well, like what makes the most sense, because I have, I've got some stock, and I'm always kind of thinking like, should I just keep investing or should I do something else, right? And I think it makes sense. Like you see things collapse pretty quickly. Like you see the market is so volatile that it definitely makes me cautious with like what I do with investments. I do have like an IRA set up, but I even wonder about that. It's like, should I keep contributing? Like, where should I put the money? So, I mean, that's definitely a great question, and I don't think I have like the best answer yet. I'm kind of trying to approach it from more of a balanced standpoint, where I have some going into investments, but I think it's definitely critical to kind of approach it like Chris is, like really weigh out the options and like just kind of decide where you stand. And I think that's where I'm at, kind of in the thick of it too, trying to figure it out.
you have to be careful. And this is something I mentioned in the last episode. I think, like, do you really believe it or not? If you really believe that this stuff is going to happen, then why there's no reason to keep your money in any of that stuff. Like, you're insane. But with that being said, you have to be careful. And the prophets and apostles are pretty adamant that you keep living life as if the second coming is very far away. But I would say even without the second coming stuff and the prophecy stuff, things are not looking super great for the world right now. And and so I don't even know if you need the prophecy stuff to get to a point where you're like, I'm not keeping my money in the banks anymore. And two other things. They also, the same person asked, is crypto the solution? I personally don't think it is. Crypto's fun and it can get you rich really fast, or in my case, lose
or
everything
not.
that you put into it. But it's not, I don't think it's a long-term solution. If the power grid goes out or anything like that, you're toast, your money's gone. It's all reliant on the current technology level being maintained. And then even things like gold, I just don't get it personally. I'm like, if we're in a situation where the world's falling apart, why would I want gold? Gold's not going to do anything for me. I want food and clothing and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's funny. Brigham Young, he was against the gold rush and saints leaving after money and stuff like that. And I have a copy of the dedicatory prayer for the land of the Manti Temple that Brigham Young did. And in that, he seals up the treasures of the earth in this part of the world. And he full on says, I'm sealing these up so that the saints aren't distracted by them. He said about gold, you know what gold is? It's pavement. The streets of heaven are paved with gold, right? And so he's like, gold is just pavement, which if you think about how pavement works, gold is a pretty good pavement. It's malleable, it's soft. It's like, I'm sure that in some sort of configuration, gold makes a self-healing road, right? Because you step on it over here and it squashes down. Well, then you just move over, step on it over here and it squashes the other way. But I know you kind of misspoke, Chris. And I'm going to call you on it because I know you didn't mean what you said. You said that the apostles and prophets are telling us to live as though the second coming is far away. Which
you're right.
is
You're right. They're not saying that.
They're saying act as though it's tomorrow, just like the Savior did.
You're right.
But I think what normally people assume about the second coming is I'm not going to do such and such because the world's just going to end. And what we should be doing is saying, I'm going to do such and such because the world's going to end, because the world ending is not like, how how do I articulate this? People misunderstand what is said by the world ending. When we could substitute the word Babylon for the world in that phrase. Babylon is ending. So the church and the kingdom, the believers, the production of the earth is all going to improve. Babylon is ending. And so we should make decisions based on, oh, of course I'm going to have more kids because Babylon is ending. How great is it going to be to raise kids without Babylon? That's going to be rad.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I like that.
Yeah. So anyway, just calling you on that. But
I'll share a story real quick that illustrates more of what I was trying to say, because you're right. I said that really terribly. So President Ballard was my dad's mission president, and during COVID, the mission reunions were through Zoom, so I would get to like join and listen. And somebody asked him, this is maybe 2-3 years ago, somebody asked him, when are we going back to Missouri? And he said, until you see the prophet pack his bags and go, you should stay where you are and tend to the garden where you are. And I think that's kind of what I'm saying is you kind of, you keep living your life and doing what you can where you are. Maybe if you pray, you'll be inspired to do something differently than that. But for most people, I don't want to say it's life as usual, but the drastic changes, at least in terms of physical stuff, like temporal stuff, it seems to be to just keep carrying on for now. Like get more righteous, get closer to God, prepare for the second coming, but don't blow your whole life up like for it, you know?
Yeah, I've got an opinion on this, and I've got some history and experience on what to do with finances. And this is not financial advice, so I'll go on that a little bit. You want to share this? You've got this Clay Martin tweet up. You want to share that? I'm sure people want to hear you read through that.
Let me share it again.
Sorry,
our obligatory Clay Martin reference for the podcast. So this was in response. This is how I felt about gold. He's responding to a post about Costco selling $200 million in gold a month, according to Wells Fargo. And he says, talking about the people who are buying it, they know not what to do, so they buy loot that is easier to steal. Gold comes way after thermal, sheep, chickens, and bullets.
Yeah.
And someone's like, well, $1 million of gold is the size of a shoebox, and sheep are loud and chickens smell. And he's like, yeah, but you can't eat gold. So
yeah.
And they say you can't eat thermals, and he's like, well, thermals protect the stuff you can eat. And that's kind of how I feel about gold. Like,
that's the dumbest argument back. I can't eat thermals. Like, dude, put some thought into this. Come on. Yeah. Okay. So here's my experience. And again, this is not financial advice. Use your brains, I don't know, licensed financial advisors, and obviously use inspiration on what to do with your money. We figured out through a number of experiences, like we bought Bitcoin, we invested in the stock market, we had mutual funds, we had an IRA, all that kind of stuff. And my dad, who's been very successful, always says, cast your bread upon the waters and it will return to you sevenfold. And I read a quote from Brigham Young where he said, and I'm paraphrasing, to the effect, I can't give my money away fast enough. And so we decided to test that out. We decided to increase our fast offerings so much that it was painful to give. For those of you who are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has a thing called fast offerings, where you can fast for a day and then take the money that you would have spent on food and give it to the fast offerings, which are then given to people who are in need in your neighborhood, or your congregation, where somebody loses their job or can't pay their bills for whatever reason. They can go meet with their ecclesiastical leader, a bishop or a branch president, and say, hey, I need some financial assistance. And it will be arranged for them. Their bills will be paid, food will be provided. They are given education, they're given access to resources for job searching, or help around the house. Like, it works very, very well. And so the encouragement from leaders of the church from day one has been to give a generous fast offering. And so we, in addition to what you saved from not eating, maybe you could give a little bit more. So years ago, we decided to increase our fast offering so it was painful. And lo and behold, all of a sudden I had more opportunities to increase my income. And so after a while of increased income, we said, let's increase our fast offerings even more. And so we did, and more income came in. And so we've gone throughout our life giving fast offerings or giving directly to people or indirectly to people who we knew who were in need. By inspiration, we give, and our income has always increased. So kind of like what you've experienced, Chris, I'm like, well, the Lord will just provide us with more. And so we've had opportunities to help many people and also provide great experiences for our kids. As we invest in our farm, it's kind of the same thing. We're looking for opportunities to increase food production. Why? So we can give out more food or make food available for people who may need it, but also to develop the skills that we need to grow and produce our own food. Last Christmas, my wife, I think the total number was 85. She baked 85 fresh loaves of sourdough, and we gave those out to neighbors. And so our life has been greatly enriched by, I don't want to say walking without purse or script, but relying on the Lord to say, we're going to give as much as we can and receiving way more than that in return. And so now we have this wonderful lifestyle. We live on this farm. We have the vehicles we want. We have the clothing we want. Basically anything that we want, we're able to get. At the same time, we give and give and give as much as possible. And I've never, aside from my dad, I've never heard that advice from anybody. Everybody says, invest wisely, hold on to what you can, prepare for a rainy day. And we've kind of flipped that on its head, and our life is awesome. We've been greatly enriched and blessed by that. And I know that the Lord will provide. I know that we'll always have opportunities to help and bless others.
It's kind of like, I hope I'm not putting words in her mouth, but I think it was Sister Nelson who shared a story. And obviously this is not doctrine or policy or anything, but she shared a story of paying at the beginning of the year, paying tithing for the amount you want to make. And then trusting God to make things happen.
Man, that's
and
nice.
I think she said that's what she's done, but wow. I may be misquoting her. I should probably look that up, but yeah, it's something I've heard go around.
Yeah, we have gone through times where we haven't had enough, and those have been challenging, but it seems like the Lord always provides. And, the other thing I did want to bring up a couple of talks by President Hinckley during this podcast. The advice from the leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is to be careful with the way that you manage your money. Be a good steward. Don't waste it. Don't blow it. Don't invest it unwisely. Don't fall for schemes that are going to make you rich quick. Be careful. And I think wasting it, I'll just pull up the talk. This is President Gordon B. Hinckley. I'll share the link so you can pull it up. This was really fascinating to me. So this was in 1998. I remember sitting in priesthood session when President Hinckley gave this talk. It's called To the Boys and to the Men. And in this talk, he brings up the story of Joseph in Egypt from Genesis chapter 41, where Joseph has this dream of the kine and the stalks, the 7 good ears, the 7 bad ears, the 7 healthy cows, the 7 weak cows. And he says very clearly, he goes, I'm not prophesying. Now, brethren, I want to make it very clear that I'm not prophesying, that I'm not predicting years of famine in the future, but I am suggesting that the time has come to get our houses in order. 1998, you guys don't remember this, but 1998, I was in college, and the money was flowing. Everybody was getting rich. The dot-com bubble was blowing up. Like, there was money just flowing everywhere. And I thought, I'm going to graduate from college, and I'm going to instantly be rich, and I'm going to invest in real estate and all this kind of stuff. Well, in 1999, the dot-com bubble burst and everybody lost everything. So although President Hinckley said, I'm not prophesying here, just be wise. And he talks about paying off your home and staying out of debt and things like that. Well, then an interesting thing happened shortly after that. And this was in the same conference. There's another President Hinckley talk that I'll share. So this is in the October 2001 General Conference. And you can pull that one. It's called The Times in Which We Live. And President Hinckley, and there's another talk in this conference that I'll share here momentarily. But President Hinckley, about 2/3 of the way into this talk, says, I do not know what the future holds. I do not wish to sound negative, but I wish to remind you of the warnings of Scripture and the teachings of the prophets, which we have had constantly before us. I cannot forget the lesson of Pharaoh's dream of the fat and lean kine and the full and withered stalks of corn. I cannot dismiss from my mind the grim warnings of the Lord as set forth in the 24th chapter of Matthew. And those of you who are into eschatology, you know that chapter 24 is all about signs of the times in the last days. He says, I'm familiar as are you with the declaration of modern revelation that the time will come when the earth will be cleansed, and there will be indescribable distress with weeping and mourning and lamentation. Now, I do not wish to be an alarmist. I do not wish to be a prophet of doom. I am optimistic. I do not believe the time is here when an all-consuming calamity will overtake us. I earnestly pray that it may not. There is so much of the Lord's work yet to be done. We and our children after us must do it. But then he goes into tithing. He goes into stopping contention, and he goes into the war in heaven. And anyway, it's a really rich talk that covers all of these things. And ultimately, he says to be prayerful, pray for righteousness, pray for the forces of good, do good. He says later on, the second to last paragraph, are these perilous times? They are, but there is no need to fear. We can have peace in our hearts and peace in our homes, and we can be an influence for good in this world, every one of us. The interesting thing, well, this is all interesting, but one thing that really stands out is this is October of 2001, and he brings up the Pharaoh's dream. I think I said Joseph's dream earlier. It's the Pharaoh's dream of the lean kine and the full and withered stalks of corn. What happened 7 years after October 2001? It was the 2008 crash. So there were 7 years of plenty. 2008 crash happened. Taken another 7 years of recovery from that crash up to from 2008 to 2015. Then we had plenty from 2015 to 2022. And then in 2022, we had a crash again. So we could probably expect that between 22 and 29, we're going to see difficult economic times. In this one, he doesn't say, I'm not being prophetic. He just says, think about it. But it is interesting how it lines up. Now, that brings us to another talk from President Hinckley in 2001. And it's called Living in the Fullness of Times. And this was actually the first talk of that session of General Conference. So I'll share the link. You can just navigate to it too, Chris, if you want. There's the link, Living in the Fullness of Times. So this is right after 9/11. And this is, the first words of the prophets after 9/11. And he says in here, let's see how far down it is. Maybe a 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs in. He says, the era in which we live is the fullness of time spoken in scriptures, when God has brought together all of the elements of previous dispensations. From the day that he and his beloved son manifested themselves to the boy Joseph, there has been a tremendous cascade of enlightenment poured out upon the world. The hearts of men have turned to their fathers in fulfillment of the words of Malachi. The vision of Joel has been fulfilled, wherein he declared, and it shall come to pass afterward, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit, and I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. So President Hinckley right there, this is Joel chapter 2. He says that Joel chapter 2 has been fulfilled. So all of those signs. It's interesting because in multiple times it says, multiple other scriptures quote Joel chapter 2, but Joel chapter 2 is the only one that mentions pillars of smoke precisely. Others mention, I think, clouds of smoke. But pillars of smoke draw us to 9/11. Remember 9/11, both the towers fell and there were two pillars of smoke that went up. So President Hinckley says this has been fulfilled. And we often see people who are talking about the signs of the times and, the second coming, they refer to Joel 2. And if I ever see that anywhere online, I'm quick to respond and say, President Hinckley declared this as fulfilled. It's already been fulfilled. We don't need to look for it anymore. It's pretty fascinating stuff. Now, the other thing in Joel chapter 2, if you click through that link to Joel chapter 2, and I would encourage everybody to go read Joel chapter 2, because what Joel chapter 2 is, it's a prophecy that says, when you get attacked, when things look horrible, when you're oppressed and you're, the Assyrian invades your land and does all of this bad stuff, slaughters all of your people, there is a way for you to address this. And starting in verse 15, he says, blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children and those that suck the breasts, let the bridegroom go forth of his chamber and the bride out of her closet. And of course, that's referring to Christ and his church, right? Let Christ show forth his power and let the church be bound to Christ. He does say before 15, he says, let's go up to 12. Therefore also now saith the Lord, turn ye even to me with all your heart, and with fasting, and with weeping, and with mourning, and rend your heart and not your garments, and turn unto the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and repenteth him of the evil, who knoweth if he will return and repent, and leave a blessing behind him, even a meat offering and a drink offering unto the Lord your God. And then it goes on to blow the trumpet. But what's fascinating to me is this solemn assembly. So when you're oppressed, do all of these things, including holding a solemn assembly. And what happened during COVID? You guys remember President Nelson? He was trying to think of a way to commemorate, and the brethren were trying to think of a way to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the restoration, or no, the 200th anniversary of the restoration of the first vision. So 1820 was the first vision of Joseph Smith. 2020 was 200 years after that. And you remember in General Conference, President Nelson said, we are going to hold a solemn assembly. And if you look at what a solemn assembly is, a solemn assembly involves unity. So everybody is unified. In fact, they're so unified, they're saying the same words and doing the same actions, and gratitude to the Lord. And if you do those things, so you come fasting, you come repentant, you gather together and you perform a solemn assembly, what does the Lord promise to do in Joel chapter 2? Basically, miraculously save you. He goes through and basically says, I will fight all of your battles for you. I will slaughter the people that are coming after you, I will take care of you. And so in 2020, President Nelson, knowing the promise from Joel chapter 2, says we are going to hold a solemn assembly and ask for help against COVID. And here we are, 3 years later, and COVID is like a dream that happened. Yeah, we see impacts of it, but the missionary work was able to start up again. Temple work was able to start up again. Churches were able to open again, and the work of God was able to go forth. And so, again, tying that back to President Hinckley saying we should look forward to with positivity for things that are coming. The greatest miracles are coming, and we should look to those with faith and belief and hope. And I think there are a lot of people following inspiration right now on how to prepare for the calamities that come. We're going to go through the calamities. They're going to suck. It's going to be tough, but we can still look forward with hope that we will be delivered, that the Lord will be able to continue to do his work.
And that was the major theme of this past conference we just had. It kept standing out to me that they constantly talked about the temple. And we just have 350 now that have been announced. And I loved what President Nelson said about how if we go to the temple, we will be okay, right? Like we're going to get everything we need to be empowered to get through all these calamities that are going to come. So to me, that was pretty reassuring and exciting to know that they're bringing temples closer to everyone as much as they can and as fast as they can to allow everyone to have that power.
Yeah, for sure. There's some pretty deep doctrine associated with, and some speculation associated with what they were saying. I don't know if we can get into some of that here on this podcast, but Chris, you had some thoughts about that whole rant I went on about Joel and President Hinckley and President Nelson and solemn assemblies, and I saw you chime in there.
Oh, it's cool. It's cool that he did that. He called everyone to fast, and then we had a solemn assembly, and we were saved, so to speak. So it's kind of cool. I did find the quote from Sister Nelson. It was Sister Nelson. So let's see. Can you see this?
Not yet.
This was in a devotional she gave at BYU Hawaii in, 2016. And she tells the story here of right here. Consider President George Q. Cannon's approach to tithing when he was an impoverished young man. When his bishop commented on the large amount of tithing poor young George was paying, George said something like, "Oh, Bishop, I'm not paying tithing on what I make. I'm paying tithing on what I want to make." And the very next year, George earned exactly the amount of money he had paid tithing on. So obviously, I'm not saying everybody should just go, I'm going to take out a second mortgage and pay $1 million in tithing or whatever. Probably don't do that. But I like the principle of just giving as much as you can and relying on God.
Yeah.
The other thing that came to mind while you were going through the President Hinckley stuff, and I was trying to find this while you were talking, and I kind of did, but I don't know if it's good enough to read. But he's talking about how he's not being an alarmist and he's optimistic. And I thought, well, President Nelson's pretty optimistic too about all of this when he's talking about it, and we're closer now than we were when President Hinckley was speaking. And then I remembered your neighbor, Morgan Philpott, was doing a lecture in North Carolina, and he talked about, he actually read President Nelson's statements in conference starting in 2018 and moving through the years until the most recent ones. And it does get it's hard to deny that it's getting more alarmist each conference. The message is getting more intense of you need to be ready. I think at one point, I think it was during the women's conference, he says, we're going to need to take, I'm not going to be able to find it quickly, but we're going to need to be able to take unprecedented measures to strengthen our spiritual foundations. we're gonna have to do things that we haven't done before.
Yeah.
And each year, that's getting more and more. Alarmist probably isn't the right word, but it's getting more intense for sure.
More urgent. It's kind of like
urgent. That's
President Holland's comments after being sick and coming back and being like, dude, I have to do my work more urgently. Like the time is very near. The quick comment about the quotes that Morgan shared, that actually somebody did a supercut of quotes from President Nelson that I saw online. I shared it with my wife. My wife shared it with Morgan's wife, who then shared it with Morgan. So some random fetcher on the internet, thanks for making a supercut of President Nelson quotes about the second coming being very close, because it's a message that continues to go out. So I've always had, not always, but since about 2018, 2019, I've developed this opinion that based on Revelation chapter 13, that an Antichrist, or the Antichrist, as we may talk about him, is going to come out with deception, right? Because we have to get to this point where the world turns against not just members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but any and all believers in God. So whether you're Muslim, Jewish, Christian, whatever, the world has to turn against believers of God. It's been prophesied of. It's very clear in the scriptures: persecutions, destruction, shedding of innocent blood. All of that is prophesied to happen. And so what gets us to a point where the world will turn against believers? Well, there has to be something that happens that puts believers in a position of being heretics. I call it the time of the heretics. And I have this whole thing about what are you allowed to do to someone who's being a heretic? Well, you can cut their heads off, right? We've already talked about this. In the season of the heretics, you find the people who believe the opposite of you. You say they are causing damage to our safety, to our way of life because of their beliefs. Therefore, we get to cut their heads off. And that time is coming. It's been prophesied. It's got to come. And so there has to be something that turns the world against believers. Well, based on Revelation 13, I believe that we will have some being either emerge from the populace or come down from the sky or come from somewhere else that is 6'5". He'll be blonde. He'll be muscular. He'll look like Chris Hemsworth. And he will say, I am an eternal being, not from here. And I am here to convince you, to share with you something, an easily attainable salvation, greater light that you haven't had. And we fabricated religion. We fabricated Christ. We fabricated Muhammad. We fabricated all of the prophets of the Old Testament so that you would have the opiate of the masses. And I can show you, based on the pierced palms of my hands and the pierced feet, or this body that I'm presenting to you, whatever it is, that Christ was just Jesus, that he was just Jesus of Nazareth. We fabricated this idea of Christ. It's not real. And anybody who still believes in that is wrong. And the evidence, the proof will be so overwhelming that most people will say, man, thanks for giving us that Christ so we could have morality for all of these centuries, and these other gods for all these centuries, so that we wouldn't slaughter each other, that we would be okay. And I think that deception will be complete, except to people who know the scriptures very well, and people who have a testimony of Jesus Christ, who have gone through the temple and know very specific things about the nature of Jesus Christ based on the covenants that they've made, that they will be able to say, nope, that's fake. That's not the real Christ. That proof you're giving us is not real. It's fabricated. And until the people get to that point where we know Christ, we know his attributes, we know his teachings, we'll be deceived. And that's where you get in Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 virgins, where you've got 10 virgins who are prepared to meet the bridegroom. They've kept themselves pure. They've been watching for the bridegroom. They are ready to attend the wedding, but they're missing one thing. They're missing oil for light. And well, 5 of them are. And so they don't get to make it into the wedding. The other 5 do, because they have that last little bit. And so that's my personal belief on why the focus is get on the covenant path, get down the covenant path, go to the temple, become familiar with all of the covenants and promises of the temple, become familiar with Christ through the temple, and you will not be deceived as long as you are faithful to the covenants that you make. So I think we can avoid deception.
That this is an urgent matter for all of us.
Yeah.
President Holland just said that.
Yeah.
And to all of my friends of other denominations on X who like to tell me I'm not Christian, we will still welcome you into Utah when the time comes.
Well,
I'll let you in.
That's the thing, is there will be, I mean, there's a couple billion Christians on this planet. And there are many of them who have personal relationships with Jesus Christ. They've spread his word. They've studied his word. They believe in him. They've prayed. They've felt confirmation that God is real, and they know Jesus Christ. And when the time comes that the world turns against Christ and begins persecuting believers, those who know him will say, we need to go to a place for protection. Who still waves the banner of Christ? And they will look at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Uh-oh.
We lost.
I think I lost you.
Mitch has left us.
Stand by, I'm reconnecting.
Starlink is failing. We'll give him a second. We can edit this.
Yeah, usually he comes back soon.
Yeah, I think this is the longest he's ever been gone. I think.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back.
He's back. Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Where did you lose me?
We lost you about how people will be looking for a place of protection and safety.
Yeah. Yeah. So there will be hundreds of millions, probably, of people who believe in Christ looking for the banner of Christ. They'll be like, where can we go to pull together all of the believers in Christ? And they will look to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that has his name in the title and even has his image in the logo. And they will say, those people still believe in Christ. They're strong. They've got resources. They're in a very defensible location in a valley in the Rocky Mountains. And we can go there. Then we can find food and resources, but we can, even more importantly, find people who will defend Christ. And I think that's what brings everybody here. If you look at what could happen, very easily, if the government decided to just change the tax law, let's say they said, we're no longer going to make religious donations tax exempt. How quickly would churches collapse? I mean, it would be overnight. Most churches would collapse. I think there are probably only 1 or 2. Well, I know that there are 2 that would survive. One is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the other would be the Jewish faith, because there are financial resources there. You know, we just came back from Texas, and you've got, hundreds of thousands, well, you've got millions of believers in Texas that are funding major churches that are doing great work. But as soon as that funding gets cut off, those individual churches that are all they're like shards of glass, right? They can't stand independently. Only a united church like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Jewish religion is going to make it through a financial situation like that. And so where will people go to find Christ when that happens? I think they'll come to Utah. They'll come to the mountains. And this is where all the heretics, Yeah, that's right. Make it $1 trillion. Yeah, we get a lot of guff about how wealthy the church is, but you can go back and read that talk by the President Gordon B. Hinckley in 2001, where he says, we've been responsible with the assets of the church so that we can survive the challenges that are coming. I mean, it's not because, they're flying around in private jets or whatever. It's because they are. I don't have anything to do with it, but the Lord is saying, okay, this is the amount of resources that we're going to need to be able to provide for people and help people through the difficult times ahead. So if that's the case, why not just rely on the church? Why not just be like, I'm not going to prepare. I'll just rely on the church. You guys have thoughts about that?
That's funny because as you were talking, I had this thought that I thought was completely unrelated, but now is not. That the church has, at least $100 billion. Inside sources are telling me it's over $1 trillion. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of resources. And it's fun to look at that and say, oh, we're going to be fine because we have so much money. We have so many resources. We have land all over the country.
Water rights. Yeah.
We've got, we're good in terms of preparation. But then I think of, again, Morgan Philpott talking about how there's really nothing stopping the government if it came down to it from just starting to take temples and seize property and that kind of thing. And I was thinking while you were talking, we have all these, the church has obviously prepared very well for what's to come. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that the promise is even, if you've prepared well, then you get to use your stuff and be okay. I think the promise is, if you've prepared, then God will take care of you. And there's a chance that all of the stuff that we have that's worldly gets taken and we're okay anyways. Because God is like, well, you prepared. You did what you were supposed to. I will now take care of you. And I don't think that that's like a crazy, I think that's a realistic scenario. And in that case, you might be glad that you did a little preparation of your own as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got in the Book of Mormon, there are accounts of the people of Alma versus the people of Limhi, who are both captive peoples, right? Being held by oppressive governments and restricted, and they both want to escape. And the people of Alma are faithful and prepared. And so when the Lord tells them to escape, what does he do to the officials that are guarding them? He puts them to sleep. And so Alma and his people load up their stuff and walk out of Dodge. Limhi is similar, but their people aren't as faithful. And so they're less prepared. And so when it comes time for them to leave, they have to contrive a scheme to get their guards drunk. And then they have a small window of time to get out of Dodge while their guards are drunk. And I would rather be in the Alma people than in the Limhi people. I'd rather be the people that are prepared and faithful and ready to go, so that when the time comes, the Lord can do his part. Obviously, he could do whatever. But if I'm faithful, then I need not fear, because the Lord will provide. The church has...
The more prepared you are, the more options you're going to have. And the church has been pretty clear that even with all of the stuff they have, they can't feed everybody. I mean, they can't, there's so many people. Yeah, they're pretty prepared and they're pretty ready to go, but there's just so many people that they're not going to be able to feed everyone. So you're going to have to rely on God, and you're going to want to be prepared yourself too.
Yeah, because they always talk about self-reliance, right? Like, that's a huge push in this church, is to be self-reliant. So to me, that just is part of what you're saying. If you're self-reliant and you're preparing, then you're going to be fine. Like, you can have peace of mind as well, and know that your family will be okay, and God will provide.
Yeah, they wouldn't be pushing the whole food storage and get prepared and be self-reliant thing if the plan was just to take care of everybody themselves.
Yeah. And they never say don't prepare with food storage, don't prepare with a garden. That talk from April 2020, when President Nelson announces that he's going to hold a solemn assembly, he says, how can we endure such trials? The Lord has told us, if ye are prepared, ye shall not fear. Of course, we can store our own reserves of food, water, and savings, but equally crucial is our need to fill our personal spiritual storehouses with faith, truth, and testimony. And I think faith, truth, and testimony is to help us overcome the deception that is coming. But you mentioned that the church has land, and I brought up water rights and stuff like that. That the big thing that's missing, and this is our fault as members of the church, is skill set and knowledge. I just recorded a handful of videos for Dwelt yesterday. For those of you who are interested in becoming a Dwelt member, you'll be able to watch those videos next week and find out more details about Dwelt membership and stuff. But one of the things I talk about is skills. It doesn't matter if the church has land and water if the members don't know how to grow food. It doesn't matter if the church owns ranches and vast tracts of land if the members don't know animal husbandry and butchering and preserving meat. We need to have these skills so that, even if they shut down church attendance worldwide, we can go to the church yard, dig up the grass, and plant a garden and ensure that it's watered, right? So now is the time to develop those skills, practice them for the next 3 or 4 years before things get really bad, or as things get really bad, and become proficient at them. When we first moved to the farm, we started a garden and we planted everything. We bought all these starts. We planted it based on how we would have in the valley. And we had a hard freeze and we lost pretty much everything. There were a couple of things that grew. It was like the squashes survived because they weren't far enough along yet, but everything else died. The second year we waited to plant. We didn't prep the soil enough, so it really struggled to do well. The third year we waited to plant. We prepared the soil, we planted, and the garden blossomed. And we got tons and tons of food. We probably got at least a metric ton of food out of a standard ton of food, imperial ton of food, out of the garden. And so, it takes, some people say it takes 7 years to learn how to grow a garden. And so you should have started the 7 years long ago. And if you want to start the 7 years now, you can start as a Dwelt member. If you can't afford to be a Dwelt member, you can come be part of my community garden. Like, learn how to garden, learn how to grow your own food, learn animal husbandry. Those skills are going to be important. It doesn't matter how much resources the church has. It's not going to be enough for everybody. And even with the resources it has, we need to be able to make them productive.
And even if the world doesn't fall apart, like, oh no, now you know how to grow food. What a terrible thing.
Exactly.
It's still beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I started last year just this small little section in my backyard with just to give my kids the experience of it. Mm-hmm. And I definitely did it wrong. As far as I put way too many squash seeds all over, and you know how squash grows? It's just insane, right? So it was overtaking everything. I did have some tomatoes that did okay, but I just learned through that process, you've got to be mindful of how many seeds you're putting and where you're putting them to make sure that you leave some space. And and it's a tiny little spot anyway that I have. And so anyway, it was a definite lesson to me that you can't just throw seeds in the ground and water them and everything's going to be okay. There is some skill to it. So
for sure. Yep. When I was growing up, my grandpa maintained a half-acre garden behind his house. He lived on an acre, had a half-acre garden. That thing produced so much food. And I remember as a kid, I hated it. It's like, oh man, we got to go over there and water. We got to go over there and weed. We got to go over there and pick. Okay, now we got to go over there because they're putting up the food. But we always had fresh peaches in the pantry. We always had beans. We always had all of this great food. We had fruit leather that we could eat, grape juice, potatoes, as many potatoes as we could possibly handle, peas. It was awesome. And it was all fresh food and it was all great for us. And None of us were out of shape. None of us were overweight because we ate real food from the ground. And like Chris was saying, yeah, it's life enriching to know how to grow your food, but it's also health enriching to eat the food that you grow. This morning I had half a dozen eggs and a quart of milk for breakfast. And from a calorie standpoint, I'm probably good for most of the rest of the day. I won't need to eat until dinner time. I feel satisfied. I'm getting all this great nutrition, and it's all food produced right here on the farm. And that's very satisfying for sure.
Awesome.
So we've been going for quite a bit. We haven't even made a dent in a lot of the topics that we wanted to talk about. I do want to call out Hashboz on X, at HASHBOZ, aka Bozy. He's been posting about how he has a brown thumb and how it's so annoying for him to try to garden. He's tried year after year. He lives in California, where you can just, unlike what you said, Dan, you can just throw seeds in the ground and they grow, and he can't get his garden to work. And he's posting failure after failure after failure. And I love it. Not that he's necessarily trying to convince others not to garden, but he's just like, it's not easy. Like, you have to work at this and develop this skill over time. But I also want to point out, maybe you're not a green thumb, and that's okay. As long as you have somebody in your community that is a green thumb. And that's actually one of the objectives that we have with Dwelt, is we want to have people who are green thumbs. So my wife and I will be helping with locations and making sure that we have gardens and greenhouses in every single location where things can grow. We'll bring in experts. We have a lot of experts who want to be involved in Dwelt, who are gardening experts and can help, with a garden. But we need diversity of skill sets. So we need people with a medical mindset. We need people with organizational skills. We need people with relationship building skills. We need people with physical fitness skills, people with animal husbandry skills, construction skills, like all of the above. And so I think, Chris, you were talking about how Bennett is kind of designing similarly, where you have a diversity of skills within your community, so that basically no matter what happens, the one I was going to mention was security skills, that basically no matter what situation you're in, you've got somebody who has experience and has the skill set to help you navigate that situation right in your own community. I think that's super important.
Yeah, you don't want to have to rely on outside people or resources.
Yeah, and you don't want to have to know everything.
Right. Yeah. But with the Dwelt Survival Guides, you can know everything.
There you go. Chris's regular plug of the Dwelt Survival Guides. So we anticipated launching that last week. We didn't get to launch that. We're still working out some of the logistical details in terms of being able to take payment and stuff like that. But that next week we should have the first Dwelt Survival Guide on getting food from animals, wild animals, and animal husbandry available. It's 88 pages, very concise, very consumable. I said 88 pages and then I said concise, because it does cover so many different types of animals, hunting, raising, and processing the meat, storing the meat, all of that kind of stuff. So very robust offering. And we'll have the same for gardening. We'll have the same for medical. We'll have the same for physical security, and a whole collection of those guides available soon.
And it's not a novel. It's not like, here's a guide on how to get food, and then I spend the first 3 chapters telling you some backstory about my life and how I never knew how to get food until recently, and it was so hard. And it's nothing like that. It is just, that's why you say concise, because it's just actionable information.
Yep. Yeah, super important. Chris, do you want to? I know we've been at it for a little bit. Do you want to talk about? Any of the? There was that wave anomaly that happened during the during the eclipse or shortly after the eclipse. Did you want to bring that one up?
Sure. Do you want to start while I pull it up?
Yeah. So basically, somebody was watching the oceanic wave charts and noticed an anomaly southwest of Cape Town, South Africa, and it coincided with the eclipse, and it was massive. It was like huge waves, and this is based on the tsunami sensors that they have on the ground or on the ocean surface, and yeah, it was something like a change of 2,000 feet or something crazy like that went all the way up the coast, the western coast of Africa, and people called this out and said, "Oh, no wonder that they had the National Guard on call and they had FEMA emergencies already declared because they were anticipating a meteorite striking in conjunction with the solar eclipse. And so they armed everybody or prepared everybody in advance for that happening." Well, physical observation. So we didn't see, or people locally didn't see
South America.
Oh, there was all
just a minute, but
again, there was also there was also one in South America off the coast of Chile that dropped 2,000 feet. But anyway, people did not see the increase in waves along South Africa and along the coast there. And so now they're reporting it's a data anomaly. So I don't know, Chris, you want to play that?
I don't know. It doesn't seem like
just to illustrate what it is.
Well, so this is showing kind of what we're looking at here. You have this big, massive something coming off of Antarctica. And the reason I would say it, I don't think it's an anomaly, is because it moves up. If I fast forward here, it moves up into like, pause it there, into Africa right there.
So yeah, it's like all the way up to Liberia, Ivory Coast.
Yeah, and I think in one of these other posts, I was just bookmarking stuff from it. It's moving up even further into the Atlantic Ocean. So here's some information. It's bigger than Texas. Waves and swells are 25 feet and higher. I saw some people saying they got up to 100 feet. And it's just, again, here's another video. You can kind of watch it moving through the ocean here. And I don't think anyone knows what it is. Some people think it's so here's your community note. It's not a UFO, it's a modeling error. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So it is telling that we're all dubious of models anyway, and we're dubious of anything that they declare as an error. I think that's telling in and of itself.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's just this massive something happening in the ocean. Massive waves. Some people speculated it was like a meteor that fell into the ocean. Some people think it's something under the ocean. That's why the UFO thing comes up, because they think it's like a craft or something coming from Antarctica. But it happened.
Could be a highway out of the great deep.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, we'll be on the lookout for ice walls to fall.
Yeah, it started happening. I guess I didn't save the post where it showed this, but it started happening up closer to the United States, up in the Atlantic Ocean up here. So just off the coast of like off the East Coast. It was the same kind of thing. This moved up and then it kind of went across the ocean and over, and then it disappeared. So I don't know. I think there was also a very similar thing that happened in the Pacific Ocean somewhere around the same time. So these weird anomalies happening in the ocean. No one knows what it is.
So we've got either data errors, we've got modeling errors, or weird things happening in the ocean. We've got World War III already starting. We've got the degradation of civilization at this point, with services falling off. We've got prophecy saying, get prepared spiritually and temporally. Now's the time. So take your tax return and do something meaningful with it. I guess that's not official financial advice, but if I were you, I would get my tax return and do something meaningful with it to get prepared, to do what you can to help your families have a place of refuge, a place of safety, but also begin developing the skills now that you're going to need to navigate difficult times ahead. And of course, first and foremost, develop the spiritual strength to navigate the deceptions that are upon us already and will continue to get worse until they turn into persecutions, beheadings, invasions, and all of that bad stuff. I think we need to wrap it up here. We thank everybody for joining us today. Have fun looking at the source material that we've mentioned here. I know a number of commenters are like, I'm going to look at every reference that you guys give. And that's pretty cool. I encourage you to do that. Become familiar with these things, but first and foremost, follow the prophet, be a disciple of Christ, and go visit your neighbor.
Yes.
We didn't even talk about General Conference or anything, so we'll have to do that next time.
I love
the spiritual arson episodes. Shout out to Spiritual Arson. Rest in peace.
I'll have to check that out. I haven't listened to that. I'll check that out.
They would go over. It was Tanner Guzzi and Adam Eberts. They would do a conference review episode. That was so
that's
anyways,
right. Yeah,
maybe we'll do one. How President
in
Holland saw
everything.
To them. Cool stuff like that.
Yes,
that's right.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Thanks. See ya.
Okay. So as usual.